Hi everyone, welcome back to Literature Analysis Walkthrough. This is lesson 3 of my 6-part series. In our last video we looked at the introduction, at the 4 components of the introduction. Actually the first 3 components we looked at in quite a lot of detail. So if you didn't catch those, go back and look at that, especially the lead-in. It can be really tricky for a lot of people. So go back and have a look at that. And now we turn our attention to thesis statement generation. So I found it useful to ask 3 basic questions when generating a thesis statement. They seem quite simple on the surface, but the deeper you go into them, the deeper you get. Let's have a look at this, and I've got examples too coming up. So the first question you have to ask is, what generally is the text about? So let's say you read the Harry Potter books, and it's about a million things. That series is brilliant. It's got so much depth. You could talk about a million things, but you can't write a paper on a million things. So you have to narrow it down to a particular theme zone. So what is it that you find interesting about that text? You might say, well, the Harry Potter series is about racism, which it certainly is. There's lots of things that suggest that. So that's going to be your theme zone. Well, you're not finished here either. You can't, if you were in grade 5, you just say the theme of Harry Potter is racism. That's a grade 5, grade 6 thing to say, and it's fine for that age level, but you have to go much deeper, of course. So what you're trying to get to is you're trying to get to an understanding of what the author wants to say about that particular theme zone. So what is the author trying to say about racism? And then you could come up with something more sophisticated like racism is bad. Well, that's not much more sophisticated, but then you go deeper again and you say, well, what is she saying? What are the implications of whatever that theme zone is? What the theme zones are things like, family and death and love and growing up and all those things. So what is the author trying to say about love? What are they trying to say about death? There's a lot of things we can say about them, and each author has their own particular take. So to go back to a Harry Potter example, you might say something like, well, in the Harry Potter series, the author seems to be suggesting that racism is detrimental not just to the individual, because they get ruined by it, but also to society, because, the Death Eaters are a pretty nasty bunch of people. So yeah, so it seems like simple questions, but it gets you deep if you force yourself to go as deep as possible. Try to get at what the author seems to be saying, but you start with what you liked about it. You read a work and say, wow, this is interesting. This stood out for me, and I want to talk about this. So then go deeper into it, and then you get some places that are really cool. Now, that might be enough. You might be able to just say that. The author of Harry Potter seems to be suggesting that racism is detrimental to the individual and society. That might be enough. That's fine. But it's really, really useful to actually go the next step and try to put the form together with your content. Now, I'm going to talk a lot about form and content coming up in this video. You have to understand this concept. If you don't, you're not going to be able to do literature analysis. So what you do with this next question is you say, okay, this is what the author wants to say in this book. This is obviously a very important thing that the author wants to say. Well, then you ask, how does the author say it? How does she do it? How does she say what she wants to say? And what you're doing there is you're digging into her text or his text, and you're pulling out those literary devices that your teachers have been teaching you since grade 5 and that you thought were useless, but they're actually very useful. Because if you can master this kind of analysis for literature, you can analyze a lot of stuff. You look at the side of a bus and there's a billboard on it, there's a sign on it, and there's an author, there's content, and there's form. The authors of that content they have a message that they want to convey to you. And if you're smart, you can say, oh, this is what they're trying to do to me. This is how they're doing it to me. They're using these particular techniques. Okay, so we're going to go even deeper into the form equals content idea next. The content is what the creator wants to convey. It's the theme, it's the subject, it's the purpose, it's the message, and if it's manipulative, political messaging, then we can call it propaganda. It's anything that you want to put out into the world. It applies to everything. It applies to everything. If you're a musician, you want a certain note to feel harsh because it's a scary moment in the symphony or whatever it is. If you're a soccer player, for example, and you have to put the ball in that particular net, you've got to use all of the form of physics and your body and your weight and everything else to get the ball over there. That's how it works. So anything that comes out of human creation, we can call the content. That's what we mean by it. Now, in order to get that content out of our heads or out of our bodies and into the real world, we have to choose a form. It's how the creator conveys that particular message. It's really interesting. And once you kind of get this into you, you start to see it everywhere. You're standing at the bus stop and you see a sign and you say, okay, this guy's trying to sell me a cola or whatever it is. If you're smart, you start to think of, okay, how are they trying to sell me this cola? What are they doing to me? How are they trying to manipulate me? Because advertising can be a form of propaganda. It's the tools, the devices, and the techniques. Now, you learned all these literary devices when you were in grade 5 and grade 6, and you're still learning new ones all the time. But what your teacher's asking you to do is to pick them, is to recognize them on the page and to pick them out. So this will be useful. So writers start with the content. They ask, I want to say something. So J.K. Rowling sat down years ago and she said, I want to tell a story. I want to tell story X. A story about a boy who's becoming himself. And I want to have a strong theme of racism in that story. Then she asked herself the question, how will I say it? Writers really do. You have to say this. They're very, very aware of the form and the content. They know what they want to say, and they're very careful in what they choose the tools that they use to convey that. Now, what we end up with is the finished product. We end up with the form. We see the form. We open up the book, and there it is. The form is on the page. And that's what, since grade 5, your teachers have been trying to get you to pay attention to the things that are being used to control how you experience the world. So the reader starts with the form. The writer gives us a particular message. So in J.K. Rowling, we've got metaphor, plot, and characterization. Those are the tools that she uses and more, probably, to convey her theme of racism. We got the metaphor of the Death Eaters. We've got the plot of the young boy growing up and encountering guys like Malfoy. And then we got characterization, where he grows and he's forced to make a particular decision about good or bad. That's characterization stuff. So these are the words that your teachers have been teaching you for a long time. And those are the things that you have to get into your essays. Now, what is she trying to say with that form? We see these things on the page and we have to ask ourselves these questions. What are these forms doing? Okay, so I'm going to go even deeper into the form equals content at the analysis level. This is what we're talking about here, is the thematic level. Racism is the theme of the whole story. Now, this form equals content works at the particular details of your body analysis. So I have to give you a little bit of information about that now. This is how form equals content works at the micro level, and I'm going to have a whole other video on how to do your body analysis, the line by line analysis of a poem or a novel or whatever. So this doesn't really apply to thesis generation, but again, I want you to understand how form equals content works. So for example, you're reading the story and you're at a particular chapter and you feel tension. Well, that was J.K. Rowling's content. She wanted you to feel that tension at that particular time. You sense that the character is untrustworthy. He feels snaky, and you know who I'm talking about when I say snaky in the first books anyway. That's what she wanted you to feel, so you felt it. Now, as a reader, as an intelligent reader, you unpack that. You ask yourself, okay, well, I feel that he's kind of this way. How do I know he's like this? What did the author do to make me feel that? And so we back up and we find the form. So in a particular poem, you might see bird imagery, for example. You might hear the sounds. In J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter, she calls him Severus Snape. Brilliant. Severus Snape. Why Severus Snape? Why isn't Snape Dumbledore? You know what I mean? The name Dumbledore. So there's a reason for it. And so the hissing S sounds of Severus Snape do what? They convey the character's snaky, suspicious character. Okay? The sound imagery of the birds develops an atmosphere of menace, okay? They establish the sense of menace. So at the analysis level, you put things together like this. We already saw how at the grander level, at the thematic level, it's the same thing. Racism is detrimental to society and the individual. How does she do that? She does that with plot, metaphor, and characterization. Screenshot this page. You need these middle words. You need them. What you've probably, screenshot this page as well, what you've probably been using is the word shows, this shows that, the color red shows this, the color, if you're not using shows too much, then you're probably overusing the word suggests. Although suggests is probably the granddaddy of all of these analysis terms. You should be using suggests at least twice in every essay. It's handy, it's convenient, it's really hard to make a kind of style mistake when you use the word suggests. It's brilliant, so master it. The alliteration on the, I like this one. The short, choppy syntax. So you're reading a poem and it's got short, choppy sentences. Well, what's the purpose of that? What meaning is being conveyed by the short, choppy sentences? Well, the short, choppy syntax mimics the uncertainty of the speaker. If you're uncertain, you're kind of choppy and short, and you're not speaking fluidly. So that's the tool that the poet used to create the content of the hesitation of the speaker or the protagonist or whatever. Screenshot this, really, really useful. Okay, let's get back to the theme. That's what I'm talking about now is a micro-analysis line by line of a poem or a movie or whatever. Okay. All right, let's use Romeo and Juliet for an example of thesis generation here. So in class, you've been talking about Romeo and Juliet for the past 6 weeks or something like that, and it's essay time. Your teacher says you have to write an essay about anything you want. So you're stuck there with a blank page and you got to write about something. Well, during those 6 weeks, you've talked about a lot of things. You've talked about violence, you've talked about the historical elements, you've talked about youth and old age and wisdom and impetuousness. You've talked about a lot of things. So you have to, as I said earlier, you have to focus on what it is you find interesting about the particular play. What is it about Romeo and Juliet that grabbed your attention? Well, if you're in a pinch, start simple. What generally is Romeo and Juliet about? Of course, it's about love. Shakespeare sat down with quill in hand and he says, I'm going to write a story, or I'm going to copy a story and put it in my own, add my own genius to it, about love, and not just any love, but young love. Okay, so then you go deeper. So you're not going to talk about the violence, for example. You're going to focus on the love, because that's what you find interesting. So what is Shakespeare trying to say about love? Now you're trying to look at the author's intention. What is Shakespeare's message? What is his theme? Well, one thing that he's saying for sure is that young love can be dangerous. Of course it is, because they both kill themselves at the end. So of course young love is dangerous. I like the word can be. Look at this. Use this. Don't say young. Shakespeare, the theme of Shakespeare's play is love. That's grade 5. Don't do it. The theme of Shakespeare's the theme of Shakespeare's play, Romeo and Juliet, is that love is dangerous. That's wrong too, because he's not saying that. He's saying love can be dangerous. In certain situations with certain personalities, young love is something to be careful of. Because as you will see in our next thesis statement, we're going to go to the exact opposite and say that love is a positive thing. Young love is a positive thing and not a negative thing. Okay, so that, as I said earlier too, that might be enough. That might be enough. One of the themes Shakespeare deals with in his play Romeo and Juliet is the fact that young love can be dangerous. That might be enough of a thesis, but again, it's really, really useful to narrow it down, especially a lot of teachers actually require it, so you have to learn this anyway. Put the form together with the content. Well, how does Shakespeare say that young love can be dangerous? He uses light imagery. So now your essay is really, really focused. You're going to write 500 to 1,000 words on light imagery. Here's light imagery, and here's how it reflects the danger. Here's the danger, and here we see in the background the light imagery. So you can go through the whole play and explore the light imagery. So put these elements together, the form and the content, and you get a great thesis statement like this. A closer look at Shakespeare's use of light imagery will reveal a central theme of the play. Young love can be impetuous and dangerously blind. Okay, now do you see how I fine-tuned it? You don't leave it up here at the young love is bad. You don't leave it at the simple level. Go as deep as you can. Be precise. I'm going to make another video on precise language too. Okay, well, let's look at the exact opposite. That's what one student found that interesting. Oh, yeah, they kill themselves. I can't say, yay, Romeo and Juliet's a lovely story. It's not. They kill themselves. So somebody wants to focus on that and get to the bottom of it. Why did they kill themselves? Well, they kill themselves because young people tend to act before they think. But look at this. There's something else that's glorious about this particular play as well. What generally is Romeo and Juliet about? Love. We're in the same position. I find that theme interesting, that theme zone. I use the word zone because it's the wider. It's not a theme, it's a zone. I want to talk about love. So what generally is it about? It's about love. What's Shakespeare trying to say about love? Well, look at this. Young love can heal the social wasteland. There's a city. It's being torn apart by these two idiot families that are killing themselves. That's the grand old theme of the wasteland, by the way. All of your Avengers movies and all of your hero movies are all about the hero healing the wasteland. I'm going to talk about that in my next video about the theme. Cool. All right. So again, that might be enough. Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet deals with the theme of how young love can renew society by healing a social wasteland. Great theme. That might be enough. But as I mentioned, it's a good idea to have firmly in mind what elements of the plot, what form you want to address. Are you going to talk about the metaphors? Are you going to talk about the imagery? Or are you going to talk about the plot development? So how does Shakespeare say that young love can heal the wasteland? Well, he uses plot development. Now you could add things to this too, through plot development, metaphor, and imagery. Something like that. There's lots of things you can do. So let's see how this thesis statement turns out here. An exploration of the play's plot will reveal that young love, though potentially destructive, has the power to heal divisions and restore balance to the social wasteland. Again, this is my brainstorm level, so it's quite simply put. Start with negative, start with positive. Here's the negative, and up here here's the negative, and this is the positive. But then fine tune it. Get really, really precise. What is it that you want to say? So my essay is going to look at the plot, follow the plot development from A to B to C, and as I do that, I'm going to show the progress of young love and its importance in bringing balance to the universe. Cool. So that was the first part of the thesis statement lesson. In the second part, on another video, we're going to examine 4 model introductory essays, and we're going to analyze, in particular, the thesis statements. We're going to reverse engineer them and try to figure out how the authors arrived at that thesis statement by using the 3-question method. So tune in.